great to be here. It's great to have capacity attendance. Coaching through well-being. I think it's important. Coaching is a pretty complex game, and well-being is most definitely one complex word. It's thrown around all over the place. So every so often, I think we need to refer back to this man. If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it well enough yourself. So we can talk about coaching and we can talk about well-being, but in terms of trying to put it into layman's language, if I go to any of the people here, if I go to any club, if I go to any county, I can ask them the question, are you going well? And it's amazing the answers you'll get if you ask them if they're going well. Ask a person if the person is going well. Ask the club if they're going well. And we won the under-14 championship. And it goes on. And that's what their understanding of going well some of the time is. So hopefully after today's proceedings you'll have a different understanding of what going well is about. So we have a player development pathway that most people would be acquainted with at this stage, and there has been a bit of confusion arising from age grade changes in recent years. We've had some counties going 12, 14, 16, 18. We've got other counties going 13, 15, 17. But on foot of an extensive discussion and debate, we've more or less proposed, or are proposing that it should be 13, 15, 17, 19. And we talk about the child, you play to learn, you learn to perform, and you perform to your potential. Unfortunately, we're beginning to see the Go games were introduced to ensure that every kid got a go. We're beginning to see an overly competitive world emerging at Go games level again, and that's a pity, and totally at variance what the youth Ron was talking about earlier. And the kid has a sense of dependence, the youth is independent, and at senior level you talk about interdependence. And if we are to align the age grades as we're talking about across hurling and football, club and county, Féile na Gael and Féile na Nóg, it's not so long ago when Féile na Gael and Féile na Nóg were 2 under-14 All-Irelands. But potentially, when this process is finished, we could have a Féile at 13, 15 and 17. Now, I think the organisation and the association would be much better for that, and players in terms of going well would be much better as well. Like, we had experiences of teams going to Portugal to prepare for Féile na Gael and Féile na Nóg finals, which was absolutely ridiculous. So, in terms of going well, that's some of the thinking that's in the background. In terms of the key principles, we talk about the pathway being player-centred, person-centred, and games-based, learner-led, effort-driven, mastery-oriented, and fulfilled. Now, those are the things that should be happening, and you could say they're pious aspirations. But at the end of the day, the key thing there is that it's effort-driven. And there's a thing called growth mindset, and it's very big at the moment. And a lot of kids, you meet them at 9 and 10, I'm no good. I give up, I'm useless. Ultimately, you want kids to understand one thing. It's effort that's going to determine whether you succeed or fail. Make the effort and you'll succeed, regardless of what it is. If you're not prepared to make the effort, you won't succeed. So they're the kind of principles that underpin what we do. Now, in terms of the coach, and we'll deal more extensively with that in a minute, the coach is trying to draw together the me and the we, because everybody wants to be the best they can be, but they must work in a group. So there's this sense of me and we, and then you must have clarity around what are we trying to do, how are we going to do it, and why is it working. So that's what, in essence, well-being and lifelong learning is. Combining the me and the we, what are we trying to do, how are we going to do it, and why is it working. Now, one of the big success stories in Gaelic games are the cold camps. There's Charlie. And Charlie Harrison is a Sligo man, unique in that he's an all-star as well, and he's the man that heads up the cool camps. So basically, Charlie, are you gonna tell us about the cool camps, if they're going well, or how they're going?
Well, I suppose everybody can see from the graphic on the slide there that, you know, there's phenomenal growth. Nearly 154,000 children took part in over 1,200 venues in 32 counties. So it's our flagship project in the games development context, and it's something that we're very proud of in the national department. I suppose a lot of work goes in on the ground, so with a project this size can't be undertaken without volunteers, without our full-time games personnel, and it takes over the summer. It's for a 9-week period that we have over 154,000 kids that take part in Cool Camps. Pat, if you want to go on to the next slide there. As you can see, technology has really come into its own in the last couple of years, so we can see nearly 73% of all our participants booked online. So we're trying to make that shift to get people to book online. Why? Because it makes the operations of our Cool Camps much easier to run for our full-time personnel and our volunteers on the ground. So if you book online, the games managers and the Cool Camp coordinators know how many children are going to turn up on the day. They're going to know how many coaches they're going to need for that day. They're going to need their requirements re-gear. So we're trying to make that shift. And as you can see, in the early days there, we had only 20,000 that booked online. So we're making, it's an organic thing as well. We're not pushing people to go 100% online because we realize from environmental situations and social situations that it might be difficult for people to make that shift. But as we can see, it makes it a lot easier for our games personnel to control our camps. And Pat, if you want to go on to the next slide there, technology, that's basically the dashboard that controls everything. So that's a live dashboard that happens during the summer months. So I can see that, the games personnel can see that, and the county coordinator can see that. So we can see on an ongoing basis where we need to make inputs on the ground. So technology has really made a massive difference to the way we run this operation. This is the largest of its kind in the world per capita, this project. So it really is gone into a different stratosphere at this stage. So technology has really been able to make us make that leap forward. Now, it doesn't do our job for us, but it really makes it easier for us to be able to do that job, Pat.
Okay, thanks very much, Charlie. Thanks for your input. And it's not without significance that there's been exponential growth since Charlie came on board. And I'd also like to mention the current chair of the HDC, Jimmy O'Dwyer, who did an outstanding job prior to Charlie as a Cool Camp coordinator.
So we have rounders-based game, fielding team and a batting team. In this situation, the ball is on a tee, so it can be played with a hurl, or it's on a kicking tee, so it can be played with a football. So again, both elements of Gaelic games are in it. You hit the ball off the tee in the hurling element, drop the hurl, you run around the bases. If you do one full lap, you get a point. In the meantime, all of your friends who are waiting to step up to the mark to play the game, they are on the bases. They're not standing in a stationary queue. That doesn't work for children. Each base has an exercise. Flip the base over has a wheelchair exercise. So we're aiming again for inclusivity. All the time the children are moving on those bases. If they all move on the bases, that team is awarded an extra point. If they are stationary and not participating, they don't get that point. They hit the ball out to the fielders. The fielders, each fielder has to pass the ball to each other. Every single person has to touch the ball.
Okay, this all started down in Trinity College on the cricket ground of all places. So, Charlie, briefly, fun and run, how's it going down?
Yeah, it's going down very well, Pat. I suppose it all started with that woman that came into your office over 2 years ago, and she just felt her daughter, who has autism, Johanna, that her GAA club didn't have an offering for her. So we were tasked with coming up with a game that was all-inclusive. So Fun and Run is basically an adopted rounders game, as you saw there, and it's the feedback from schools, clubs is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Like you've clubs like Raheny, Kilmacud, numerous other clubs that have inclusion hours, and they're using this game. Teachers are finding it very useful because of the dynamic in their classrooms. If you have 30 kids, you have different ranges of abilities and needs. So Teachers are really finding this easy to set up and easy to use. And the most important thing to remember is that Fun and Run, everybody can play the game. And it's very adaptable, so you can use it for lower rangers or higher rangers.
Okay, and thanks as well, Charlie, for your input into that. Now, Conor, you made it from Thomas Davis to Leixlip, and you're one of the driving forces down there in terms of the urbanisation issue. You want to elaborate a little on what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I suppose I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, Pat, in terms of how are we going well, and I suppose I categorise that in maybe under 3 headings in Leixlip. We have commitment from all of our club, from our executive right the way down to the people who cut the grass for us, that they wanted to invoke change. We've kids having fun, and the participation levels have gone up. So we've gone back and done a root and branch analysis, and we've looked at our schools. What's feeding the exponential growth that we see? We're lucky in Leixlip that we are in an urban setting. We've 15,500 people that live there. The next development plan, we've another 3,000 chimney pots to come. So we put a foot in the ball in 2014, and we said we're going to have to do something to contain what we have, to solidify that, and then to plan for the future. So we went back to the schools. You'll see we've about 1,400 children in 4 primary schools. 51% of the boys in the schools participate, and 42% of the girls. And this is a truncated slide from last night for those of you that were here, so we'll try and get through this a bit quicker. But what it's telling us is we're doing things right, but I believe we can get more from that. And coming back to Charlie, like last year we had to trawl the county for hurls and schlitters and helmets the first day of our cool camp. So we now have 2 cool camps because we couldn't contend with the numbers. So everything you're doing is feeding into what we're doing. It's great to see that linkage between us all. What we do in Leixlip, and again, very quickly, we've gone even earlier than your normal academies or pathways. We've looked at the Buntus model, and we've worked with Kildare Sports Partnership, and we start working with children when they're 2 years of age. And we're bringing the children and their parents onto the pitch. So there's full parent participation. So if you can see the slides, we started in 2015 with no one at that age group. And year on year, we've over 110 people now, and both parents and children, 2 to 4 years of age, partaking in our games. But if you look at the pathway from the 5 to 7 year olds, you'll see in 2015, for the club of our size, we're 1,500 members, 875 of us playing the games, with 40 children partaking from 5 to 7 year olds. That wasn't good enough. So you see, with a bit of thought, with a bit of structure, supported by the 5-star centre, our, I suppose, initial academy is now at 190 people. That's where we should have been at, we're now there. We didn't know we'd get the Buntus, so on any given Saturday in Leixlip, we've 300 kids from 2 to 7 taking part in the games. In fairness to Pat and his team, without the support of the 5-star centre, being able to seek advice from you, the support we get in Leinster from Alan Mulhall and Kildare from Noel Mooney, and the GDAs and the GPOs, it's fantastic. I'm not. Might click on there,
in terms of, I suppose the big challenge then, Conor, is get them to 5 to 7 to 9 to 11. We get the 60% drop off then or thereabouts between 12 and 17.
It's a huge.
Are you confident you're going to take these kids through to 17?
As I sit here, Pat, I have to say no. That's our biggest fear, and we've been discussing this. So we've built this. You use the term MVA. We've a massive volunteer army of people that help us deliver this. It's not just 1 or 2 people. So what we've done, we've gone back, as you see, right to the earliest stage. We all love the GAA. We're preparing them to stay now before the Go games. So initially we were planning for them to stay between those ages. So our biggest challenge is keep them from 2 to 7. Have fun and prepare them then that we're not letting them drop off. We're going to have challenges around streaming. We're going to have challenges, football against hurling in Kildare. But at least we know that they're there, and we're going to work with good people like yourself. A lot of the speakers last night, Paul and the 2 Kierans and Owen, I'm going to learn more from them this weekend. So, look, we don't have all the answers in Leixlip. We just put a bit of structure around it. We're delighted to be supported by the GAA Inc., and long may it continue.
Okay, and you celebrate your success down there as well, Conor?
Well, I suppose we do, and again, how are we going well, Pat? There are 2 groups of under 7s, boys and girls, most of them from last year. So when we started our process, we had one group of Go games going into the Kildare North board. Now we have 4 teams in both boys and girls dual. So for us, we've quadrupled what we're doing, not by doing anything fantastic, just being committed, creating a brand around it. You see our club Leixlip, you see coaches talking to young children, and again, all supported by the GAA. You might be able to see it in the bottom right-hand corner. That's our cool camp this year. So look at, not doing anything special, but conscious that we have to mind them, we have to look after them, and now the challenge is avoiding that 57% drop-off.
Okay, thanks very much for that input, Conor. Now, the youth run at the outset spoke about the youth forum and the importance of listening to young people. We're delighted we have 2 people here today, Leanne Hannafin and Owen Gately. I'm going to call on Leanne and Owen now to come forward and basically to take over proceedings to give us some feedback on the conference.
Thank you, Pat. So as Pat said, both myself and Owen are 2 members of the GAA Youth Representatives. One of our biggest jobs as youth representatives is the organisation and running of the annual GAA Youth Forum. So this year was our 5th annual Youth Forum, and it took place on the 27th of October right here in Croke Park. Since the start of the Youth Forum, it has grown from just 100 delegates in its first year right up to a peak of over 600, so that's huge for us. This year, to make things a little bit more age and developmental appropriate, we had a number of interactive workshops for 3 different age cohorts. So we had the 12 to 13, 14 to 15, and then 16 plus. As well as that, Uachtarán and John Horan mentioned earlier that we held a youth congress with 180 of the 16 to 21-year-olds, and that was structured by roundtable discussions and voting. The results that we got from these were very interesting, and we intend to present them to the annual GAA Congress in the next few weeks, but we would like to share some of the results with you here today. So the first question that we asked, we wanted to put a good focus on the opportunities available for young players. So the first question that we asked was, do you think there is too much of an emphasis on development squad players ahead of club players at youth level? A huge 72% said yes, then 23% said no, and 5% said that they didn't know.
So other things we wanted to look at was a positive playing environment, a positive environment for young people when they're playing, when they're taking part in GAA games. So one of those questions was, as part of your training sessions, as part of your drills, are coaches actually explaining the rules of the game and seeing where these rules will impact on your play and the way you carry out a drill, such as tackling? And a startling 70% of players said that the rules of the game were not actually explained to them when they were learning a new skill. And I think that's very important for the culture and for the environment that the players growing in, because if they don't know the rules, they can't play the game and it'll be harder for them to develop. Furthermore, we looked at kind of interactions between coaches and players. So another important question was, have players ever experienced verbal abuse from a coach or group of coaches? And 67%, as John Horan alluded to earlier on, 67% of players have received verbal abuse from management. And that is just non-conducive to players wanting to play on when they're older, and it is a huge reason for drop-off. Players just become disenfranchised. And then, have you ever experienced verbal abuse from parents or supporters in the crowd? And this could have been your own parents, and there are them out there, and opposition parents who are trying to kind of get in your head. And once again, 77% of players have received abuse from somebody on a sideline of a game. And you know, that's just a real harrowing statistic. Being both a player and a coach myself, I think 77% is far too high, and I'm sure everyone in this room can agree.
So another question we asked was, do you think that there is too much of an emphasis on winning at youth level? So you can see there, kind of half and half. 48% said yes, 50% said no, and then 4% said that they didn't know.
Just thanks for the feedback. And just for a sec, Leanne, tell us a small bit about yourself. You're from Tralee?
Yeah, from Tralee, from Austin Stacks.
And tell us a small bit about yourself, Owen.
I played for Lucan Sarsfield and managed the minor hurlers last year.
And what age are you?
19, just
and
19 there.
You were managing the minor hurlers last year?
Yeah.
And what was the most significant finding you got from that?
If you have an environment where players want to train, they want to win, and they're enjoying themselves, you're unstoppable.
Thanks very much. Okay, one of the bits of feedback was kids not getting regular games. And I'm delighted to introduce Carl Craig. Carl would be well known as a Roscommon footballer. He'd also be well known as an international rules footballer, and he's currently taken over from John Tobin as Connacht Games Development Manager. He's going to tell us, Carl is going to tell us a small bit about the super games and how we're using those to try and ensure that we provide more games.
So I suppose I've been involved in the youth forums with Quiva since they started 5 years ago, in and out doing talks and helping organise them and that sort of thing. And we've done some youth forums in the counties in our province as well. And I suppose looking at the feedback that the guys here have presented, it's quite obvious that we need to change or have a look at different ways to provide games opportunities to our players, particularly at youth level. I suppose the statistic there is 77% where players are getting abuse. Nearly half of them think there's too much emphasis on winning. So they're high percentages, and it's something that we need to look at. So Pat's concept of the Super Game Centre, we took it on there before Christmas. It's something that Kieran Boyle in the Southeast has rolled out earlier in the year in WIT. So the format it is small-sided games, 7-a-side, 9-a-side, roughly 10 minutes per half. They're running with goals only with the hurling. We run with goals and points for the football. It can be run in schools, in clubs, and it's an open format, so it can be mixed teams or club teams coming in to do it. And again, it caters for all ages, under 12s, 13s through to 17s at youth level. So what we have ran is we've called it Friday Night Lights. It's in a series of blitzes. We have four of them in total. We have 2 of them completed. So we had one on the 7th and the 14th of December, which was a huge success. Charlie is also big time involved in it and has helped out great with it. So we over the 2 nights we had over 350 players from 39 clubs and from all 5 of the Connacht counties. And we have one next Friday night and the 25th. So for next Friday night's games, we have, as of yesterday morning, we had 138 registered for that. So probably by this evening, we'll have to look at that, Charlie. It'll probably be booked out by this evening, okay? So there's huge demand for this concept from coaches and from players. So this is just some of the feedback that we've received from clubs, from parents and from coaches. So just first one is there, a text message from a parent that the 2 kids had a great time and that they couldn't wait to come for next week. The middle one there, if you want to just take a read of it, is quite an interesting one. So you can see where it is, where it's looking at the coach went round to look at the weaker players who were playing on the different teams, and what he felt was that the weaker players were getting an opportunity to play simply because the teams were mixed up. The stronger players didn't know the players that they were passing it to, and all weaker players were getting an opportunity to play, and they get to play for a full hour. Whereas with our competition structure, them weaker players would most likely be sitting on the bench because the emphasis is generally always on winning, and the focus is on the top players. The bottom one then is from a small club in Roscommon, where they thought it was a great initiative for a small club struggling with numbers, and it's a great way for their players to train mixed and with players of different abilities. Then just through social media, just some of the feedback. I just took a few screenshots of what we had got, so you can see there on the far side. Needs to be extended nationwide. Kids love the Friday Night Lights, the concept of that. On the bottom left there, you can see John O'Mahony was there the first day. He came up to have a look at it. He thought it was great. There was no blanket defences on show on the day either. The 2 in the middle there, a club from Sligo and from Mayo, they had a great evening. And here in the bottom right is that the official GAA are realising that kids just want to play football, and it should be rolled out. So that's just some of the feedback that we've got from the first 2 evenings, and it's something that we hope to roll out the Friday night lights over into the other counties, into the likes of Anaduff, where they have the Leitrim Training Centre, Scarden and Sligo, Lough George and Galway, and so on. So it's something that we see as being big over the next couple of years, something comparable to what the Go Games has become.
Carl, sorry to cut across you. There was just one thing in particular in the first Friday night. It was possibly the only bit of negative feedback that we received. It was just before the game started, and 2 parents in particular couldn't understand the open format. And we kind of verbal abuse to kids. I think we got a little bit that night. They couldn't understand why they weren't playing with their own club mates and their old schoolmates, and why they were being tossed into teams with players they didn't know. So that was one kind of thing that we took from that night. But it's a phenomenal experience to see these children who don't know each other just playing as if they've known each other all their lives. It really is a good experience. Yeah,
so we just set it up literally. There's 20 players in a dressing room. The referee has responsibility for them 20 players. He has a bag of balls and bibs. He brings the players out to the pitch, throws 10 bibs here, 10 bibs here, and the players organise the games themselves, organise the goalkeeper, backs, midfielders, forwards, and they play the game. The referees the game. And they rotate every 12 minutes. They have a 3-minute break, and they have 4 games across the hour. And there's absolutely no issues whatsoever. The players just take ownership of it, and they really enjoy it. So I suppose the one key message that we've got from it is just give more responsibility to the players, and I suppose not to try and take over from them.
And that's very much in keeping with the Ombudsman as well. Kids have responsibility for their own affairs. They're not being told what to do. They manage the process. So super games are an emerging phenomenon, and a very important one. And they're going to become a bigger part of the process down in Connacht at the Centre of Excellence in Ballyhonus once they get this bubble up and running. Now, just basically, I want to conclude, because I'm working against this clock a bit, steps to better coaching. You know, the feedback from the Youth Forum in terms of the coaching is not good, and it should be a hell of a lot better. So basically, everybody in this room that coaches is going to fall into one of the 4 following categories, COACH. So the first guy, you command action and choice. You're the boss. It's a vertical relationship, and it should be history. The second one, you control activities and change. It's more of a horizontal relationship, but the thing is not connecting up this. Because why? There's not enough of energy coming from the players. There's too much energy coming from one source, the coach. There must be energy coming from the players into this system. We look at the third one. You consult, you advise, and you challenge. That's good. And what are we seeing here? We're seeing plenty of energy in this system. And this is what a team is, an energy system, whether we like it or not. It's made up of human energies. And that's good. And the ultimate is you co-create and you assist character building. So we're all in this together. And the connection has been made, and there's phenomenal energy in there, because you're working with the players, and what are you trying to do? You're trying to develop character. And if winning is an obsession, I'm not sure you'll develop character, because you get all the kind of stuff that goes with that. And that ultimately is what the J has always been about, and that's what it always should be about, the development of character, and that's what we should be about. So they are the 4 categories of coach. And raising standards, if you're at 1, it would be good to get to 2. If you're at 2, it would be great to get to 3. And if you're at 3, it would be wonderful to get to 4. So coaching, as I said at the outset, is a very difficult process to explain. And when you get into physiology and psychology and psychophysiology and neurobiology, it just becomes mind-boggling stuff. So we'll try and pare it all back and think of yourself as a farmer, right? And for those of you that don't have agrarian backgrounds, apologies. So, the farmer cultivates plant growth. The coach cultivates player growth. That's what you're trying to do. Now, without soil, the farmer will do absolutely nothing. It's an impossibility to grow anything without soil. Values, as the President said at the outset, are the human equivalent of soil. No values, no soil. We won't cultivate growth without values. So values are essential. And I finished up sending some stuff in a very roundabout way to Alex Ferguson one time. I don't know Alex Ferguson. I don't have much interest in soccer, but a friend of mine sent some stuff that I put together to Alex Ferguson. And the one thing that really stood out for him, I used the acronym I'm all team. So we have integrity, modesty, objectivity, unity, loyalty, dignity, tenacity, empathy, authenticity, and maturity. That was the thing that really resonated with Ferguson, the values. Okay, we push on. What seeds are the plants? Behaviours are the human development. So the values determine the behaviours. In this country in 2007, we didn't have values. We didn't have good values, which led to poor behaviours, and then a dreadful banking culture, and the country collapsed. It's not rocket science. The values determine the behaviours give you the culture. So they are the equivalent of the seeds. Now, we have the soil, we have the seeds, but the farmer must plough the field. And in a coaching equivalent, that's the same as the development of skill. The farmer must harrow the field. That's the equivalent of physical fitness. Now, if you didn't plough the field, there's no bloody point harrowing the thing. And that's what goes on a lot of the time, and the President mentioned it. And I have this discussion with my kids at regular intervals about the ability to kick the ball with your left and your right, and they're talking about S&C and GPS. I said, for God's, in the name of God, I said, the ability to play the game comes down to kicking the ball, passing the ball, anticipating what your teammates are going to do. S&C may be part of it, but it's a bit like this game here. If you didn't plough the field, there's not much point in harrowing it. In terms of the farmer then must sow the field, and that's the equivalent of the mind. That's where the mind clicks in. And we'll do something big at this conference next year in terms of the mind, because in my opinion, that's the last untapped frontier. There's real progress to be made in that space. I think we've gone too far with S&C and GPS and all that kind of stuff, and we're not enough into the mind. And the farmer sprays the field. And that's the equivalent of performance analysis. And I probably should keep my own views to myself on performance analysis. Now, the farmer does all of those things, but there are also environmental requirements in that the farmer, the crop must get light, air, heat, water, and nutrients. Because if it doesn't, it fails. So what is the equivalent of light, air, heat, and water in a human context? Build trust, self-esteem, family feel, high morale, team spirit. They are the human equivalents of light, air, heat, water, and nutrients. And this is what the players must get from the environment, because if they don't, the plant, you won't get the growth that you're looking for. So the farmer finishes up with crops, and the coach cultivates human capacities. What capacities? Competence, confidence, commitment, conviction, and connection. They're the capacities you're trying to develop. And then, as a coach, you have management and leadership capability, experience, and reflection. So, I said at the outset, you align the me and the we, and you integrate the what, the how, and the why. So, you know it's me and we, and what, how, and why. That's what you're trying to do as a coach. So, finally, well-being. What is well-being? There's a biological side. If you don't get physical activity, you can't be well. It's an impossibility. So people must get physical activity. Ideally, 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity a day. So that's the bio. Then we move on and we talk about the psycho. That's confidence and contentment and happiness in the head, happiness in the mind. The next bit is interacting with other people, the social support system. And the final bit is the spiritual. and we're conveying messages. The spirit basically lives in your soul, and your spirit is, you're contributing to a higher order, you're contributing to the common good. So you feel, you think, you do, and you become. And basically, that's what well-being is. And if we want to promote well-being and lifelong learning, you have to have regard for the bio in here, the psycho, the social, and the spiritual. That's how we develop people. And are we going well? Most definitely if people understand that process. Why? It's holistic and it's humanistic. And next Wednesday night I'll be in the club in Rathore, where John Brennan, Juvenile Secretary, is organising a session for all of the underage mentors, and we'll be going through some of what we have here. And I would love to see a situation in every club in Ireland on the second or third Wednesday night of every month, bar August maybe and December, where all the coaches in all the clubs will come together and establish, are we going well? Thanks very much.